Hello and welcome. We are Menopause Muse. I'm Helen Tite and today with me is Pat Taylor, and we today are going to talk about hormones. Now, did you know that everyone has hormones? Because there's often this association, isn't there, that women and hormones, again, it's an eye-rolling thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
The bottom line is we all need hormones to operate on every single level of your anatomy every single second of the day. But we're going to do a little touch base, a little whistle-stop tour on hormones and the connection to menopause. Okay, so with us now we have a slide. It's described as hormone hell. And we did this with a tongue-in-cheek approach around why hormones are really important for the body and what they do. So let's start with the first slide. Okay, so essentially we have 6 major big guns, and we start with estrogen because that's the most famous one. Estrogen has, it's not just one hormone, it's several hormones. It's also a manufactured hormone. And finally, there are bioidentical hormones. And they're all words that you may have come across in your research or what you may have seen on social media. The next hormone out of estrogen is
Progesterone.
Yeah. And progesterone is mostly prepared in your ovaries, and it's often the one that is related to the cycles, but we will come into a bigger detail about that next.
So the next one is testosterone, and you always think about testosterone as being a male hormone, but women need testosterone, and it is one of the female sex hormones, and it really improves quality of life conditions if you can get that replaced if you need it, and it's a neglected area of medical practice. And, you know, we do lose some of our testosterone in menopause, so it's really important to consider testosterone.
Okay, so from here we move on to cortisol. Yes, you've heard of the word cortisol, and it taps into maybe when we're feeling stressed. So women with high waist to hip ratios tend to produce more cortisol and report more stressful lives. Again, we will come back to this in a bit more detail. The next we've
got thyroid next, and the thyroid controls your metabolism, and when it's out of sync, that's when you get hypo and hyper, and if you have thyroid problems you really notice those differences, and it's really important to get those in check. And it also regulates your temperature,
which is a big deal during the menopausal years, as some of you may know, or people that you may know of have struggled with heat, temperature and hot flushes. And finally, out of the big guns, we've got adrenaline. And adrenaline, we need to understand, helps us with our mood, our health, our tempers, and to understand that also plays quite an important role in the hormone roller coaster that goes on in our bodies on a second by second basis, let alone a journey, which is what we keep coming back to. That menopause is a journey. It takes us from pre-menopause, perimenopause, menopause and post-menopause. Okay, so we're just going to move on from here and go into a slightly deeper delve, because it's all very well and good understanding what hormones are, but actually how does it make you feel? And that is really the critical point. So when we talk about this in our numerous courses and programs that we deliver around the subject, what we often find is it's all very well you telling me that I'm estrogen low or estrogen high, but what does that mean and how can I make myself feel better? Okay, so estrogen flip-flops, it's never easy, is it?
No.
So estrogen flip-flops, which means that some people come in with high estrogen, and what that can often look like, low estrogen, and that can often look like night sweats. It will present with hot flushes, vaginal dryness. So atrophy means dryness. for the sake of this program. Incontinence, so that's little wheeze, but also the bowel may change. Mental fuzziness, migraines and sleep disturbances are all connected to reduction of estrogen in your body. So let's stay with that for a moment and give you an example. So as a female, she may be struggling with sleeping because she's really hot at night, and she wakes up with hot night sweat. She's sweated so much that she might need to change her bed sheets, which then she's up and lacking sleep. And then the next thing is she's still got to get up, she's still got to get to attend the day ahead, whatever that looks like, whether it's shuttling family back and forth to school or indeed trying to get herself to work, whatever that looks like. So the demise of estrogen is subtle, and that demise starts probably late 30s, early 40s. So if you remember, our previous talk was about the journey of menopause. The perimenopause years can last about 15 years, and estrogen reduction is the big one. Alternatively to that, some people do struggle with things like pounding, headaches, yeast infections, breast swelling, nausea, leg cramps, and excessive bleeding. And that's when often their GP will say to them that they're estrogen high. And again, you're like, what does that mean? So fortunately, there are, it's always about the balance. Many women will be treated to support, particularly around the headaches and the excessive bleeding. Okay, so we'll move on. Let's have a look at progesterone.
So progesterone, you know, sometimes we think everything's dropping in menopause, but what might happen is your estrogen drops, so your progesterone symptoms will be exacerbated, and you might have heavier periods, and you could kind of have the PMS symptoms like the tearfulness, the bloatedness, maybe your skin breaks out, so and anxiety, all of those kinds of symptoms because of that progesterone fluctuation.
But it's also things like hand pain, isn't it, and foot pain.
Yeah.
Suddenly you notice when you get out of bed you might be a bit creaky, or your hands ache, and you're like, oh, and it's just an odd thing, but that is the responsibility of progesterone.
Yeah, restless legs as well. You know, when you get in bed or if you're sitting watching the telly, your legs are restless and you just can't cope with it. And then you might find you've got palpitations. So palpitations are that feeling you're aware of your heartbeat, and it might be a little bit faster. It might have an odd beat, and that can be really quite worrying. And there's certain things you can do to reduce that as well, like reducing your caffeine and alcohol. And also you might start feeling depressed, or those feelings of sadness as well. And symptoms of like fibromyalgia, so you might get joint pain or muscle pain, feeling fatigued. All of those come along with progesterone. So, yeah, we need to look out for that one.
So the next thing, I always think these are the big three. Testosterone. Now, interestingly enough, testosterone it depletes during menopause, and it never comes back unless you actually apply testosterone. That's a different subject. What's interesting to know in terms of science, there's replacements for estrogen, there's replacements for progesterone, but very little replacements for testosterone yet. But that's coming soon. So it's interesting that a woman predominantly loses these three big chemicals in her body, but science is only moving forward at the moment that two are brought back. Testosterone, no, it's not the thing that makes you bulk. That's our perception, our bias. We understand that testosterone equals a male anatomy. That's not true. It's a tiny dose, but equally it is enough when it's diminished that you can lose your sparkle. So many women will report their they've lost themselves a little during this journey, and they feel like their sparkle's gone. Now, you can't really define that. You can't put a pin on that as such, but it is that sense of wellness, well-being. You just don't feel like the girl you used to be. And I think that's what most women who are testosterone low or depleted may feed back. And that also includes, they may have lost their hair's become quite thin. Again, there's those symptoms of fibromyalgia, vaginal atrophy, but also libido. So many women will report that the libido is completely diminished during their menopausal years. And that is mostly and predominantly connected to testosterone.
And many women say that they find their joy, don't they? That's what you describe it as. You find your joy when your testosterone levels are increased and back to normal.
Yeah, absolutely. And more of that later.
Yes.
Okay, so next we have
cortisol. So what's cortisol? Traditionally, it's the one that makes you store fat around your middle, which is really annoying and distressing, and it increases your appetite. So, it doesn't help, does it? It's a bit of a...
It was the sigh that came in. Yeah. Oh, it doesn't help. But yes, I mean, cortisol. So when in later sessions, we will actually talk about why it's so important to try and manage the stress in your world. And cortisol is to blame for that, which is really unfair. So think about cortisol. It is the thing that puts you off food, but equally, when there's a lot of cortisol in your body, it's the thing that makes you want to eat food. So it's kind of got a double-edged sword. Double-edged sword,
but we need cortisol, don't we? We need all of these, but in the right amounts.
Yeah, and it comes back to balance constantly, doesn't it? So when you're balanced, so you might feel frustrated in the journey that you don't feel that you're getting all the needs out of your medical practitioner at the moment. But if we can get one bit right, so let's just focus on the estrogen. If we get that bit right in your treatment pathway, then hopefully the other symptoms will start to come into line. If we can get one right, then we can start moving on. So it is a little bit of a game of chess. So there are lots of little challenges and moves that need to be done on your changing and evolving body. So that's also important to know, that what may have worked for you in terms of your symptoms and treatment for your symptoms, what may have worked when you were 45 may not be the same as when you're 48 or 50 or 51 or 55. Okay, let's come back to thyroid. Thyroid. So when a female, she will often go to the GP because there's a cluster of symptoms. Puffy face, weight gain and fatigue are normally up there, and that's when your the blood test will have a look at your thyroid function. But it's really interesting here because you'll notice that fatigue is also linked with testosterone as well as thyroid. So, and fatigue will sit quite a lot into the aging body, which is a bit rubbish. Brain fog, here's another one that's linked to thyroid as well as testosterone. Forgetfulness, depression, also linked to progesterone, testosterone and estrogen. So you can see why it can be really confusing for yourself, let alone your health professional. When you go in there, they need to have a look at what's going on and just get sort of like a real feel for who you are. That is why we always talk about the symptom track and why it's really important to record your symptoms, whether it's your heat or your mind or actually weirdness that's going on in your body. Okay, and last but not least
is the adrenaline, and we might be faced with adrenal fatigue, which is where you might experience some burnout, especially when you're leading a stressful life. So it's really important to think about that self-care in your life so that you don't suffer the burnout. And it's like that, it's that feeling, isn't it, of the constant revving of the engine. So you're constantly on guard or you're constantly stressed, and we need to manage that because it really does and can affect everything. And it's your fight and flight, that one that gets you going, it gets you stressed. But we also need to pull it back so that we can relax, take care of ourselves and really relax and make sure that we're living a life that is stable and steady rather than on the go all the time.
Yeah.
So it's really important to manage all these hormones all together and being mindful of one or the other.
So pulling all of this together, this session today has been wrapped around the understanding of what chemicals are, your hormone chemicals are, and what impact they have on your life. And that is the important thing, because all of it's manageable, all of it's doable. It's having a little bit of understanding of, the responsibility of these hormones in the first place, and to know that there is support out there to help you feel well, and not only feel well, but to be vibrant and thrive as we get older. And that is the preventative model that we like to call Aging Greatly. Okay, so that's it for today. You can contact us on
info@icareimove.com or find us on the website www.icareimove.com.
And don't forget the Menopause Muse Facebook group, where you have access to loads and loads of content, loads of fun, and that feeling of being in a great community because you're not alone.